All right, let's go ahead and walk you guys through the process of modeling a kind of a retro sci-fi rocket ship. And one of the reasons why we're going to do this is because it's going to have round circular portholes that exist on the side of a cylinder to try and reinforce how to create some adaptive edge flow going from the up and down and around the circumference edge flow of the cylinder of the rocket and the circular edge flow of those portholes. So to get started, I'm actually going to start kind of from the porthole itself, in all honesty. I'm going to set my radius to 1 because I will be using the grid quite extensively in this demo. And also I'm going to set the subdivision axis to 8. All right, and the reason for that will be a little bit more apparent here in a few minutes. Go ahead and right-click on your object and select the faces and go ahead and delete them. All right, and I am going to zero out the translate X, Y, and Z in the, in the channel box. Okay, let's go ahead and hop over here to our top ortho view. I'm going to go into select edge mode, and I'm going to double click on one of these outer edges so I can select the edges around the circumference of the cylindrical plane, if you want to consider it as such. I will click on the extrude button, and instead of using these manipulator tools that come default with the extrude, I'm going to press R on my keyboard to get the scale tool. All right, I'm going to scale that up about half a unit. Now we can always click on shading and come down and turn the X-ray on, which it should have been on. We should be able to see the grid through that. It's okay. But we want to scale it up about a half a unit, and then I'm going to double click on that and hit extrude, press R to get the scale tool, and I'm going to scale that up about that far. Now what we're going to do is we are going to take this outer cylindrical shape and we're going to turn it into a box. So I'll select these upper two edges and use the scale tool, and I'm going to scale these along the z-axis. Now, usually when I'm doing this, I'll scale it twice just to make sure everything is nice and flat in alignment. Press W on my keyboard to get the translate tool, hold down X so that it snaps to our grid. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the bottom. Select those two sides, scale it along the z-axis, grab the translate tool, hold down X, and snap it to the grid. All right, we'll do the same thing right here without commentary. All right, now this is the reason why we took that original cylinder and we reduced its subdivision axis from 20 down to 8, because it adapts nicely into this box shape for the plane, and yet still retaining the circular edge flow in the center. Now, just to reinforce the edge flow, I can go into select faces mode and I can select one edge and hold down shift and double click the edge next to it. We'll select all the edges within that edge flow. Actually, I can do the same right here. And you can see that even though the shape of these different faces is a little wonkier, that they're still adjacent to one another in terms of a ring. Now let's go back and let's select these right here. And I'm going to tap the spacebar to get out, and then tap the spacebar on my perspective view to go into the perspective view. And now I'm going to extrude that, but I'm going to double click on the extrude icon in my polygon shelf. I'm actually going to increase the divisions by 4. Go ahead and hit apply. And I'll grab the blue translate tool. All right. Now I don't want to grab the regular translate tool, but part of this multi-tool that comes with the extrude options, and extrude it out there, because with these 4 subdivisions, they will exist along the extrusion. And as long as we're using this multi-tool to extrude it out, it will equidistantly space each one of those divisions. Now the nice thing about this is, if I go into smooth preview mode by tapping 3 on my keyboard, having those extra divisions will help preserve our hard edges going around this little porthole as it is kind of extruded from the surface of what will be our rocket ship. All right, I'm going to just set those divisions back down to 1 and go ahead and close that. I'm going to go back over into my top ortho view. I'm going to grab this edge here and that edge right there, and let's go ahead and extrude those. All right, now it looks like we have a division right here I don't necessarily want. We can go ahead and fix that. There might be a division setting So it looks like the division setting of 2 is set for extruding edges. I'll just take that back down to 1 and hit close. But I'm going to hold down X so it snaps to this grid increment. I only want to come over 2 units. And even though there is this extra division in there, I can just click on that latest Polyextrude edge input. I can come down to the divisions and turn that back down to 1. So now that we end up with this, it's what is that, 6 units wide, but it's kind of divided up by these 2 by 2 unit square shapes. And that's really what we want right now for the moment. Okay, so now I'm going to come back over here into my perspective camera view. And what I want to do is I want to subdivide this. Now I want to use some different subdivision options. I want to use the Maya Catmull-Clark subdivision options. I'm going to come down here into the settings for that. I don't want it to smooth all. I just want it to smooth the internal and then map the borders. So if I go ahead and apply this, you can see what's going to happen is that this outer edge will end up remaining square, whereas the inner edges, it will kind of subdivide along those averages, the same sorts of averages that are featured when we go in the smooth preview mode. Now I do need to go back over into the top view and fix an edge. All right, this edge right here. As we subdivided it, it bowed it, and that will actually affect what we're going to do here in just a little bit. So I want to scale that flat along the x-axis right there, and then I'll translate that back so it snaps onto that grid increment. All right, and then everything else should be okay. Let's go ahead and just close those smooth options. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a nifty little feature, the Duplicate Special. That can be accessed by clicking on Edit, coming down to Duplicate, and Duplicate Special. But we're going to go to the Options box. All right, just going to move that out of the way. Now what we want to do is we want to duplicate this 2 times. All right, in addition to the original instance that we have right here. But each time we duplicate it, we want to offset it by 6 units on the x-axis so that this object is duplicated in this space right here. So let's go ahead and make sure that our geometry type is set to copy. All right, let's change the number of copies to 2. And we don't want to have all the translate, all the rotate should be zeroed out. By default, all the scale should be 1, positive 1 by default. What we want to do is change this translate x to 6, meaning that the new instance will be placed 6 units along the positive x-axis from the original. So we'll end up with 2 of those. So if I hit Duplicate Special, all right, it should just be automatically just populated in that number of instances to the right, because that is our positive axis. Now let's go ahead and take these 3 objects and click on Mesh and come down and combine them so that Maya recognizes them as one object only. Now if I go into smooth preview mode, you can see that how it's smoothing down, we have these corners pulling away from each other. It tells us that it's combined, but it's not actually merged. So I want to right click on this, go into select vertice mode, and I want to select all these vertices right here. It looks like I accidentally grabbed one too many, so I'll just hold down Shift and drag select on that to deselect it. With all those selected, I should be able to click on Edit Mesh and come down to Merge, and it should merge all those together. So now this is officially one object that has been totally and completely merged together. All right, so let's do the same thing right here. I should, in theory, just be able to hit G as in George on my keyboard, and that will repeat the last action performed. Okay. All right, let's now go ahead and click on Modify with the object selected in object mode, and I am going to come down to Center Pivot. What that'll do is that'll recenter my pivot point as per the center of this geometry. And I'm going to hold down X while I'm in the translate mode and just translate that over so it is now in the perfect center of our grid. Okay, now we are going to take a slight detour from the modeling tools, or the polygonal modeling tools, and we're actually going to go into some of our rigging tools. Namely, what we want to do is we want to deform this and wrap this or bend this object around on itself, kind of like if you had a piece of paper that you were rolling up into a little paper tube. Sorry, I'm a little stuffy this morning. Now, before we do that, something that will help us with that is if we increase the subdivisions on this object. So I am going to just go ahead and click on the smooth icon. All right, so that our polygon count is increased right there. All right, and having those additional subdivisions it'll help us maintain a better, more pleasing cylindrical shape. Otherwise, it'll kind of bend a little funny in the sections where we have the portholes and kind of flatten those sides out just a little bit. Okay, so now I can click on Deform in the rigging subset of the program. So Deform, Nonlinear, Bend. Now what you're going to see is a little green handle appearing in the center of this geometry, and we have this new bend input. Go ahead and click on the bend input and just initially change your curvature to 90. All right. Now what that's going to do is we have the straight handle that shows us the axis or the orientation of the bend handle, and then we have this little C shape that shows us the degree of curvature in the bend handle. Now at the moment it doesn't look like it's doing a whole heck of a lot to our model. You can see actually this porthole sticks out a little bit more, that porthole considerably less because of the angle on which it's bending. But now what I can do is with the handle selected, with it being green, is I can just grab my translate tools and actually bend it down and rotate it in the direction that it needs to go. And we see that it needs to actually rotate along a negative degree on the rotate z-axis. So I'm going to actually manually enter in a value of -90 right there. All right, so that it is now oriented precisely with our geometry. And coming back down to the curvature, 90 degrees isn't quite sufficient for what I want to do. So I'm going to actually double that to 180 for that value, and that will make it come all the way back down to where those two edges will now touch each other. Okay, so with that being done, I'm going to click on Edit, come down to Delete by Type, and I'm going to delete my history. That will delete the bend handle, but it will retain that curvature that we just put in there. And then what I need to do is just go into Select Vertices and select all these shared vertices right here. And go back into the modeling subset of the program, click on Edit Mesh, and Merge. All right, and there we go. So now let's go ahead and once again click on Modify. We'll recenter our pivot. We'll rotate this 90 degrees along the x-axis. Okay, I'm just going to look at this from the side and from the top and everything. And I'm going to go into Translate, hold down X so that it snaps to the perfect center of our grid. Okay, and then you can see with those extra subdivisions looking down at it from the top that it really has done a rather decent job of forming a nice little cylinder there. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we just need to extrude things up and we need to extrude things down. So I'm going to double click on one of these edges along the top, and that should select the entire circumference of that edge flow. And I'll go ahead and hit extrude. Okay, now I want to use the regular translate tools right here. Actually, you know what? I'm having a little problem there. I'm going to double click on this again, double click on the extrude options, make sure our divisions are turned down to 1. I don't need that extra division in there. I noticed that because I'm in smooth preview mode and all of a sudden an extra edge appeared in there that wasn't there previously. So now I'll go ahead and hit extrude, translate it up. See, I don't want to use that green handle because it gave me that kind of unpredictable result. So that's why I want to use a regular translate handle to translate that up. And I'm going to take it up about as high as I want the top of this rocket ship to actually be. All right, so take it up. I'm going to snap it to that grid unit right there. And now I will hit extrude again. And this time I'm going to scale that all to the center like so. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to merge all the, these edges and stuff together as if this were just a regular cylinder. So I'm going to click on Select, and I come down to Convert Selection to Vertices. So what it'll do is it'll convert those edges that we had previously selected to a vertices selection. And now I can click on Edit Mesh and Merge. And if I press 3 on my keyboard, we should see that it is merging like a cylinder. Okay. Now that I've done that, I'm going to double click on this edge that we used to establish the height, and I'm actually going to drop it down a hair. Okay, and now we'll start contouring the top of our rocket ship. So I'll insert another edge loop somewhere right in through there. We're just eyeballing it, just kind of feeling it out. Come on. There we go. The tool was misbehaving there for a second. All right, so if I go into smooth preview mode, I'm kind of pleased with that that shape that I'm getting. Now, I like to put a little lightning rod on the end of my rocket ships. I just think it kind of adds to the retro aspect of the design. I'm going to select this in object mode. I'm going to go to my mesh tools and grab my multi-cut tool. I'm going to click off to the side here, and I'm just going to drag that across while holding shift so it snaps to these angles. All right, so I'll let that go, and that'll pop in an extra edge loop right there at the top. I can grab all the faces just north of that. I can hit extrude and take that up. Now, you can actually see I'm getting some unexpected edges in there. So real fast, I'm going to try this again. Select this, I'm going to double click on that. So we had division set to 4. I'm going to set that back down to 1 for this extrusion. All right, so that I can grab just the regular translate tool. I'll take that up maybe about that high. Scale that down so it tapers ever so slightly. All right. Now if I go into smooth preview mode, it kind of transitions kind of awkwardly from the bullet nose into that lightning rod. So I'm going to use something called an offset edge loop tool. It's actually really cool. So basically you click on an edge and you scrub back and forth and you end up getting an edge above it and an edge below it. Okay? So we don't have to insert 2 edge loops, and then that will help us to manage the transition from that bullet tip on the nose into that lightning rod. And it is in smooth preview mode, kind of deforming funny up there. So I'm just going to grab my regular insert edge loop tool and insert an extra edge loop like that. And that'll just help it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing right up there at the top. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same or something similar with the bottom. So double click on this bottom edge. I'll hit extrude. I want to go into regular preview mode. I'm going to press W to get the regular translate tool. And extrude this down to get the height on the bottom half of this rocket. Okay. Now I'm going to go into my perspective camera view. I'm going to extrude this and I'm going to scale it. All right, and I'm going to scale it in about yay far. And now I'm going to extrude and I'm going to scale in again. Now there's a reason why I did that, and that should be more apparent here in just a minute. I'm going to click on Select, Convert Selection to Vertices so that I can go into Edit Mesh and merge them together. I'm going to look at a smooth preview to make sure that it worked the way that I wanted it to. Now the reason why I put in, did those 2 extrusions was so that I would get this edge ring right here. That helps me preserve my edge flow along the bottom of the ship so that I can come in and I can actually start to divide things up, because I can insert a new edge loop on a 4-sided face, but I can't do that on these 3-sided faces right in here. All right, and I kind of want to divide up my rocket ship like this. because I want to take some of these faces. I'm going to grab the Paint Select tool, hold down B and scrub that up. So I'll select those right there. I want to take some of these faces and actually extrude them up and into the ship just a little bit, just so I can mostly break up the bottom of the spaceship, make it a little bit more interesting. I don't need to extrude right there. I'm just going to go ahead and pull that down like so. And actually, you know what? I am going to scale that in so it tapers a little bit as well. All right, just give us some better contour. I'm going to select the vertices for everything here on the bottom and actually taper that in as well. So the ship actually kind of swells a little bit in terms of its form coming up here to where the portholes are. I will grab my Insert Edge Loop tool and throw in an extra edge loop about through there. Let's look at this at our side view. Right, go into Select Edge mode, grab that, and let's scale that up just a little bit. Okay, now what we need to do is insert some edge loops down here, close to the bottom of our ship, just to preserve the hard edged quality. And actually, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do it with the bevel tool. So I'm going to select all these edges that I want to be hard. All right, and that one right in there. That should be all of them. And I'm going to click on Mesh Tools and come down to, let's see, maybe it's in Edit Mesh. Edit Mesh, Bevel. All right. So that definitely made that edge a lot chunkier than I want it to be. So let's go ahead and take a look at our polybevel inputs. I'm going to take the fraction that's currently set to 0.5. I'm going to set that to 0.1. All right. And so it'll bring those edges a lot closer together. And now also the segments, I'm going to increase that to 2. Maybe we'll take a fraction of 0.05. All right, go into smooth preview mode, and there we go. That looks a lot better. All right, it was a lot faster than manually inputting all those edge loops. All right, so here is the body of our rocket ship. Now we need some fins. So I'm going to go ahead and select these faces right in through here. So I'm going to bring my fins out so that they kind of offset with the windows, so that they fall in between each section of window. And because we have 3 windows, I'll go ahead and go with the 3-fin configuration, make it sound all schmarmy and official and cool. Let's go ahead and do an extrusion there. Now this time, because I am basically extruding out along 3 different axes, I'm going to grab this little blue translate handle, and I'm going to go ahead and translate it out about yay far. Now you notice because it's translating, since I grabbed this handle, it's translating from this central point. That translation has a tendency of expanding outwards. I don't really want the tail fins of my rockets to get fat the farther away they get from the body. In fact, I want them to do the opposite. So I'm going to click on one of these boxes. It doesn't matter which one. And the little scale box, what that'll actually do is turn the scale on from the center. So I can grab that, and I can go ahead and scale it down now, like so. All right. Actually, let's scale that in even more, like this. Okay, things are starting to get a little on the extreme side. I can actually just tap W on my keyboard and then scale a little height back into them, like so. All right, now I'm going to just translate them down and set them down kind of like that. All right, if I go into smooth preview mode, it looks okay. But what I am going to do is grab my Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to insert an edge loop right here on each one of these fins up and close to the body so that it makes it look a little bit more mechanical how they actually depart from the body and come down like that. Now, I'm actually also going to insert a new edge loop about right here, about right there, and about right there. Okay. Now, I just popped them in there without a lot of thought for exactly where they went, because I'm going to go into my poly split ring input, which was created when I used the Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to set the weight of each one of these to maybe 0.333. All right, so that'll put it about a third of the way down. I'll go to Poly Split Ring 10. I put in this weight to 0.333. Right, and go to the next input down and set its weight also to 0.333. Okay, I'm going to select each one of these edges, and I'm actually going to translate it upwards just a little bit. All right, so we can start to curve these fins, and grab the insert edge loop. Let's go ahead and do it again. Right down here, right down there, and right down there. Let's go ahead and take each one of those and set those weights to 0.5. So the next one, 0.5, and the next one, 0.5. Let's grab each one of those new edges and kind of translate it up a little, like so. All right, and finally, I'm going to grab some of these vertices right in here like this. Okay. And I'm actually going to scale those in just a little bit. Okay, and so I'm getting some nice contours, something I'm satisfied with. I just want to try something real fast. I didn't rehearse this for the demo, but I just feel like it would give a nice little aesthetic. I'm going to grab the insert edge loop tool and just insert another edge loop right here down around the bottom. And that should make the bottoms of those fins have a harder edge, whereas the top have a rounder edge. I just think it's kind of a fun little aesthetic there. All right. One last thing that I want to show you guys that we didn't get a chance to address in class as a class, but I feel like it would benefit each one of you individually, is we're going to go back in and add some rivets to the body of this rocket ship using the Duplicate Special tool. All right, so the first thing I need to do is actually draw a rivet. All right, now that's a little large, and I definitely don't need subdivision axis and height of 20. I'm going to go ahead and go back down to 8 and set the radius maybe to 0.05. That is a little small, 0.075. Yeah, we'll go ahead and go with that. Now, let's go ahead and hop in here and look at this object from the side. I'm just trying to get everything oriented right here so I can see exactly what I'm working with. Okay, so this point of view right here, I'm going to come out of smooth preview mode. And I'm going to take this rivet, I'm going to move it about right up in here like so. All right, just kind of visually eyeballing it. Actually, if I hold down V, it'll snap to where we have this intersection. So let's go ahead and go into smooth preview, or not smooth preview, into the perspective view. And I'm going to rotate this rivet 90 degrees on the rotate X axis. Now let's take a look at this from the top. All right, I'll press F so the camera zooms in on it. You can see it's aligned on that vertice. I'm actually going to rotate it along the Y axis. So it ends up aligning itself along that radial edge coming out of the center of our rocket ship right there. Okay. So we get it all nice in position so that its edge flow is essentially perpendicular to that of the body. Now if I go into translate, by default the handles are going to set to translate this object along a world space. If I double click on the translate, it'll bring up my, my move settings. I can change the orientation of the axis from world by clicking on the drop down to object. So that way I can actually push it in to the body of the rocket ship a little bit more along the lines of its orientation relative to the rocket ship. So I'm going to back out here and go ahead and change my axis orientation back to world. Whoops. Here we go. I'm going to hold down D and V. Now what I want to do is I want, whoops, D and V again. I want to make this aligned with the center of the rocket ship. Now the rocket ship might not be perfectly centered on our grid, so that's why I held down D and V so that it would snap to points on on the other piece of geometry or on the body of the rocket ship. Now what I want to do is I think I want to put about, well, I'm trying to think what would be a good number. Let's put 36 rivets around the circumference of this ship, just because that divides easily into 360 degrees. So I have this object selected. I'm going to click on Edit, come down to Duplicate with Special in the Options box. I want to turn the translate off. We're not doing any translation, so zero all those out. Now this time I want to rotate it 10 degrees on the y-axis, all right, per each individual instance. So 10 divides up into 360 36 times. So I'm going to set the number of copies down to 35 because we already have the first of those 36 rivets. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Apply, and you can see that it's duplicated those around the point where we have the pivot set. All right, so now they go around the circumference of our rocket ship. So we hop back out here and go into smooth preview mode. Actually, I should have accounted for that. Let's go ahead. I'll just select all of them, and actually I'm going to click on mesh. I'm going to combine it down into one object. And let's do a center pivot on that. And we'll just scale it in into the center. And that should take them all into the body of that rocket ship like that. Okay. So now we have rivets running around the circumference of this rocket ship. Okay. If I wanted to have another row of rivets, I could go ahead and grab this. Actually, this is a good time to hit Edit, Delete All by Type in History. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And I'm going to push it down here a little bit. It'll probably start to go into the form because the rocket ship is swelling out there. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of cheat it and scale it back up a little bit. I think the scaling would be rather negligible in terms of the scale of the individual rivets from the bottom ring to the upper ring. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the channel box editor and I'm going to rotate this one 5 degrees on the y-axis. So now it's offset in an interesting manner from the original set of rivets. Okay, so there you go. I hope that was informative.